Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Miss VR Speaks. During this podcast, I would like to talk to you guys about my pregnancy experience and being pregnant during COVID, being pregnant during the Black Lives Matter movement that took place this summer, and the aftermath and the riots and the protests and everything in between, being pregnant during the thick of elections, being depressed while pregnant, and my delivery story, because all of this helped shape who I am today. And I am very different than I was when I first started my podcast. When I first started my podcast, I was just a child care provider who wanted to make this world a better place for children in general, including my future children. But I was not a mother yet, so those concerns were just hypothetical concerns and fears that are very real, but nothing that I was immediately facing. When I found out that I was pregnant, things became more real for me because now I'm not only a Black woman in this country, I am about to bring a Black child into a world that's not ready for it. During the thick of the social injustices that were taking place this summer, during the riots and the protests, and all the drama and racism around elections, it was very racially motivated and driven, and it was a very intense time. And being pregnant during that time just made everything more realistic because I'm not just thinking about myself anymore. I'm thinking about my unborn child. I'm thinking about the father of my child, my fiance. I'm thinking about my brothers and sisters and how can I make this world better for them. But being pregnant during this time, it stopped me from doing a lot of things that I had wanted to do. I can't go to protests because I'm not only worried about my safety, I'm worried about the safety of my unborn child. And I can't be getting maced or, stampede over because things are going left at a peaceful protest, or I'm not able to be in a large crowd due to COVID, and I'm not only putting myself at risk, but I'm also putting my child at risk. So I had to take a step back and reevaluate a lot of things that I wanted to do and focus on having a safe pregnancy, a safe and healthy pregnancy. Being a Black woman in America comes with its own fears. One of those fears is childbirth within itself. So before I even knew that I was pregnant, a fear that I had always had was dying during childbirth. Because you read a lot of articles and you hear a lot of stories of Black women dying during childbirth. And research shows that the mortality rate for Black women is higher than other ethnicities in America. People believe it's because doctors do not take the healthcare concerns of Black women seriously. So their concerns go unheard, their cries go unheard, and their health seeps through the cracks, and childbirth comes and they don't make it out alive. They don't make it to hold their child. And it's a very sad reality for a lot of people. So even without even being pregnant and going through pregnancy or childbirth, that was a fear that I had. So on July 11th, 2020, when I found out that I was pregnant, it was one of the most happiest and saddest experiences of my life. And I'll explain that because I was happy because I was about to finally become a mother. Like I said before, I'm a child care provider. So I spent 10 years of my life taking care of other people's children. And now I am finally able to carry my own child and be present and active and educate and love and support and encourage and uplift my own child. All the energy that I have put into taking care of other people's children, I can finally put in my own family, my own legacy, my own empire. So I was ecstatic. I was very happy. But in that same breath, I was afraid and sad because I'm thinking I am a Black woman who has to go through this healthcare system, and there's a chance that I might not survive childbirth because the doctor may not take my concern seriously. So I may not be able to be there for my own child like I was there for other people's children. And that's a very scary feeling, to know that I spent 10 years of my life pouring my love and support and knowledge into other people's children, but I might die during childbirth and not be able to be there for my own child. So I'm happy, but I'm also very scared and I'm very sad. But the thing with that is, I was not able to share that with everybody. I was able to share my happiness. I was able to walk out with a smile on my face and say, hey guys, I'm expecting, we're expecting. But I was not able to share my fears of not surviving childbirth because I didn't want to be looked at as a negative Nancy. Like, oh my God, Fiara, do not focus on that. Focus on the fact that you are about to become a mother. Focus on the good. Focus on the immediate joy. Do not think long term and do not think negative. Focus on the right now. And all of those opinions would have been right. But my mind would not allow me to think about the immediate joy only. My mind would be happy. And after that happiness, I would start thinking of sadness, of what if I don't survive childbirth? So after finding out that I'm pregnant, the next step is to find a healthcare team. Like I said, I've always been afraid of not surviving childbirth. So I knew to better my chances of survival, I would need a birthing team that looked like me. So I located a Black OBGYN, but the network that I was in did not have any African American midwives. So I was with a midwife who was a person of color, a woman of color. And she was very amazing and very kind and gentle, and she listened to my birthing plan, and she made sure that I was very well taken care of during my delivery, and I would not change my midwife. And if I ever was pregnant again, I would want her to be my midwife again because she was very amazing. And I just enjoyed my experience with her. But I found my Black OBGYN and I called to set an appointment. But due to COVID, I was not able to get an appointment right away. I had to wait about 4 to 6 to 7 weeks before I was able to get an appointment. And even with that appointment, it would be a virtual visit. Now, it was not what I had wanted because I'm not a very patient person. I wanted that immediate confirmation of me being pregnant medically. I wanted an ultrasound and I wanted to know how far along I was. So I went into the ER to get a confirmation of my pregnancy and my status of how far along I was. When I went to the emergency room, I did confirm my pregnancy. I was 5 weeks pregnant. And not only was I pregnant and 5 weeks along, I found out that I had 4 uterine fibroids, something that I did not know that I had, something that I had no clue what it was about. But the ER doctor comes in, she lets me know that, hey, you are pregnant, you're 5 weeks, but you have these uterine fibroids, so it might complicate your pregnancy. You are so early in your pregnancy. If your baby dies, it dies, and there's nothing that we can do to stop that from happening. And I am completely in shock because this is all new news to me, nothing that I had been made aware of in advance. So I'm learning that I'm pregnant, but I'm also learning that I'm at risk of losing my child. So I was distraught. So I called my mom and I'm in tears and I'm letting her know, like, hey mom, yes, I'm pregnant, but I have 4 uterine fibroids and it's putting me at a higher risk of miscarrying. Not only is it putting me at a higher risk of miscarrying, it's going to make it difficult for my fetus to continue to grow if the fibroids continue to grow, which could put me at risk of having preterm labor. And during labor, I'm at a higher risk of bleeding out due to the fibroids. So now I have all these red flags that are circling back to my fear of not surviving childbirth. So now I'm happy that I'm pregnant. I have the confirmation that I wanted, but now I'm finding out that I'm at risk of losing my child. And not only that, if I do and can carry this child successfully, I'm at risk of dying during childbirth. Now, this is not just an unknown fear that I have that's just lingering in my brain. Now it's more realistic because I have a healthcare concern that could cause me to lose my life during childbirth. And it made that fear so much more real and made my pregnancy a very scary and roller coaster. I will say that my pregnancy was a beautiful experience. And my first trimester, I didn't have much morning sickness. I didn't have an appetite, but I knew that was normal. I wasn't sick. I wasn't as tired as I thought I would be. It was a great experience my first trimester. Second trimester, I got my appetite back and I was able to eat what I wanted and when I wanted. Third trimester, same. Like, I did not have any complaints during my pregnancy besides a few back aches and pains. But other than that, my pregnancy was a very lovely experience. So during my first virtual doctor's visit, I meet my midwife and she's alerting me to the COVID concerns. She lets me know that due to COVID, you can't have any visitors accompany you to your doctor visits. You have to come solo, which again was sad because this is my fiance's and our first child. We wanted to go on this journey together, but now I'm finding out that that might not be a possibility, or that it's not a possibility due to COVID and the restrictions of the hospitals and clinics that are in place. My midwife goes along to let me know that no, she is not a black woman, but she understands the fears that black women have during childbirth, or dying during childbirth, and that's a very real fear. She cannot understand it because she's not a black woman, but she will do everything in her power to listen and take my concerns seriously and take care of me during my pregnancy. And that's something that made me cry during my virtual visit with her, because without me having to mention this was a concern of mine, she let me know that that was already on her radar, and it meant everything to me that she had done the research and she had done the work, and she was aware of what was happening in society, and she wanted to do her part as a midwife. So we're continuing our conversation, and something that I loved during my pregnancy was there's questions that they ask you to, like, mental check-ins. It's like a mental survey of how are you mentally okay? And during that first survey, I was very open and honest with my midwife, and I let her know my concerns of dying during childbirth. I let her know that the social climate of elections and the social injustices was weighing heavily on me. I was letting her know that the pandemic and COVID was weighing heavily on me. And I also let her know that I went to the ER and I found out that I had 4 uterine fibroids, and fear of not having a successful pregnancy and dying during childbirth was weighing heavily on me. And she strongly encouraged me to seek help and to start therapy. And that was something that I did because I did not want to burden the people in my life. I did not want to consume people with my problems. And I had people who were telling me, Fiara, we're here for you. We love you. Reach out to me if you need anything, if you want to talk about anything. But I know everybody has their own problems and their own mental concerns during a pandemic, something that we've never experienced, and it's new to everybody. And I don't want to put my burdens and problems on anybody, but a therapist was the best outlet for me because I did not have that fear, because that's their job. And it was an amazing experience, and I will dive into that a little bit deeper a little bit later. But her recommending therapy to me was great. She also knew that I wanted a black OBGYN. So when I told her that, she was very understanding that there was a possibility of me switching clinics to find that black OBGYN unfortunately due to, well, I can't say unfortunately because I had a great experience, but I was not able to switch to that clinic due to insurance and timing. So I was with this midwife the whole time. We were able to find multiple black OBGYNs that were alert and aware of my concerns and were available during my delivery. And I was able to find a black doula who I found privately. So I was able to communicate with her during my pregnancy, during my delivery, and post delivery. So that was also amazing that she helped me find a birthing team that looked like me. So my fear was just a little bit eased because I know the chances of survival are a little higher when your birthing team looks like you. When I first started therapy, the therapist wanted to know my concerns. And my first concern was the vivid dreams that I was having of dying during childbirth. And as crazy as that sounds, I would close my eyes to fall asleep, or during the day I would fall into a daydream, and I would dream of myself dying on the delivery table. I would dream of my funeral, and I would dream of the people that I love struggling to continue life without me. My child growing up without me, and it was very scary. It made me not want to go to sleep. It made me not want to have downtime, because if I didn't have anything to think about, I knew there was a possibility I would think about death, and that was not a happy experience. It was very depressing to think about your death and to think about the people that you love trying to cope with you not being in this world, thinking about your child growing up without you. I let her know that I was not able to think about life beyond childbirth. So I would be able to think about my 9 months of pregnancy. I was able to think about a potential baby shower. I was able to think about what my baby bump would look like. I was able to think about delivering. And then my mind would go blank. It was like I was not trying to give myself hope. I was not trying to get my hopes up of, oh, you'll have this beautiful life after giving birth. My mind wouldn't go there. My mind would literally stop after childbirth, which further gave me the thought of, oh, that means you're going to die. If you can't think of life after you deliver, that means you won't be here. And then I would start thinking about death. And it made it very scary to be alone. It made it very scary to be lost with no thoughts, because I was afraid of the thoughts that would come to my mind. I let my therapist know that elections was a real fear for me. I did not want to bring a child into Trump's America, but I knew that that was a possibility. I have had my share of racist encounters, and I know that that's very real with or without Trump in office, but it was so much worse with him in office. And with him out of office, even, because people are still the same. But I felt like it was worse with him in office. And I did not want to bring a child into this world with that much hate being in control of our country. But I knew that's something that I had no control over. I have no control over elections. I can vote, but that does not change the outcome of the elections. I was having a hard time dealing with the social injustices and racism that was happening at that time. I was tired of turning on the TV, logging into social media, and finding out another racially driven incident had happened. Another murder had happened. Another police officer got away with murdering an unarmed black person. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know how to escape that, because that's a reality for me. I look at the racism in this country, and I think about the safety of myself, my unborn child, my fiance, my siblings, my mother, my father, my friends, my extended family, and it's a real fear for me. And I cannot escape this fear. I don't want to leave the house. I don't want my fiance to leave the house because the fear that they or we may not return was very real for me. And it still is very real for me. And I wanted to learn how to cope and be better. And as joyful as my being pregnant was, I was afraid of birthing a black child. And knowing that one day my baby would experience racism. Knowing that one day someone will mistreat my child because of the color of her skin, or the coiliness of her hair, or the shape of her nose, the shape of her lips, the color of her skin. And there's nothing as a mother that I can do to prevent that from happening. So all these fears I'm articulating to my therapist on our first meet, and she diagnosed me with depression and PTSD. Something that I kind of figured, in PTSD I figured I had, but depression is something that I've suffered with my adulthood, and I suffered with high functioning depression. And like I said, I did not want to have downtime. I would overwork myself. I suffered from high functioning depression. So I would overwork myself to where I would not have enough downtime to think about the things that made me depressed. I never solved those issues. I just kept going and going and going 1,000 miles an hour, so I would never have to address my real issues. But being in a pandemic, when you are forced to move slower, and being pregnant when you're forced even more to move slower, you are forced to think. You're forced to say, hey, I have a problem and I need to figure out how to fix things. Or at least I was honest with myself, and I knew I had a problem and I did want to fix it because I wanted to be the best mother I can be. And I know that I cannot be the best me unless I start to fix my problems. I cannot be the best mother I want to be if I don't fix the things that I know are wrong with me. So my therapist, over a few sessions, we come to understand that, Fiara, you have a control issue. And everything that you fear are things you can't control. Things that make you depressed are things you cannot control. So since you can't control these things, trying to find solutions to these problems consume you. And it's contributing to your depression. So let's figure out coping mechanisms. You can't control these things, but what can you control and you can focus on? Instead of focusing on the fear, what can you do to better the situation? What do you have control over? So no, I do not have control over elections, but I can control who I vote for. And I know the last election, I voted for someone who did not get into office. Trump was in office for 4 years. We survived that as a country. For whoever's opinion, some may say we're in a worse off situation, some may say better, but we survived that term. If he's elected again, it will be hard, but we can survive that. So vote for who you can vote for, and everything else you have to release, because you do not have control over who's in office, but you have control over your next steps, which is continuing to educate and show people what love is, to show people what it means to be anti-racist, to do the work and to continue your buttons and to continue your podcast and to continue your stand up to hate play dates. These are all things that you can control. The next conversation that we tackled was understanding that I cannot control the racism in this world. I cannot control the social injustices that are happening and will continue to happen until we fix our country. But I can control my exposure level to them. So yes, I will always fear for my safety, because one thing I cannot turn off is my skin complexion. But I can turn off the TV. I can disconnect from social media. I can and I did take a hiatus from my podcast. I can and I did take a hiatus from my buttons, because yes, it was a therapeutic experience, but making these buttons and visually seeing Black Lives Matter, and reminding myself Black Lives don't matter, or making buttons that says justice for George Floyd or justice for Breonna Taylor is reminding me that we still don't get justice. We still aren't at peace. And it was just not good for my mental state at that time. So I took a break from that. And I also took a break from the Stand Up to Hate Playdate, not only because it was hard at the time, but due to COVID, it made planning a million times harder. So even though I want to get this message out and I want to continue to educate parents in the next generation of children, I knew that due to COVID restrictions, I would be juggling a million and one balls trying to figure out how to get this playdate, to happen, because we were, still under tight quarantine restrictions. So I had to let those things go and unplug periodically, so I was not being overly consumed with the reminders of what is happening. I can unplug, and she wanted me to find my happy space. And during my pregnancy, my happy place was a warm bath and listening to my daughter's heartbeat. So my fiance and I bought a fetal heartbeat Doppler, and every night I would listen to her heartbeat and I would be able to zen out. I would turn on my diffuser, sit in a warm bath, or sit back on the couch and just listen to her heartbeat, and it would be the therapy that I needed to find my happy space and to unwind from a day, whether it was intense or not. That was my happy space during my pregnancy. As for my dreams, I started to think about what if. What if I survived? What if I lived through childbirth and I was able to be alive after childbirth? What if? And I started to think about growing with my daughter. I started thinking about educating my daughter, and I started to invest in her. So I would think about the books that I wanted to read to her to remind her that she is a beautiful brown-skinned girl, that she should love herself, that she needs to be kind, because there are enough unkind people in this world. Let's contribute to the kindness. I wanted her to love and respect everybody regardless of their differences or similarities. I bought books, and I registered for books that I wanted to empower my child to be a positive influence in this world. And I decided that I started to decorate her room. So part of her room decor are canvases that I found on Etsy, and they're of a beautiful black girl with two puffs, and she's holding a unicorn. And there are words of affirmation on them. So one says, I am smart. One says, I love my hair. One says, I am beautiful. One says, I am loved. One says, I'm protected, and so on and so forth. And I said to myself, these are words of affirmation with the image of a beautiful African-American girl on there with curly hair and brown skin and features that look similar to my daughter. And every day that I bring her out of her crib or we're in her room, I can read off these words of affirmation to her from infancy and empower her all throughout her life. So these canvases were blank, and I gave one to each of my friends with children, and I just asked them to allow their children to paint and color them as they pleased. So these are images that my daughter's friends have colored for her, and they know what it means to them. Like, okay, my friend is beautiful, my friend is smart. So when I show my daughter, I can say, hey, your friend colored this for you and it says I am beautiful. Your friend colored this for you and it says I am smart. Your friend colored this and it says I am loved, I am protected. And she will feel the love and she will feel the protection from these people without knowing them yet, because she isn't, and she is not recognized faces yet, but she is hearing these words of affirmation from an early age, and they will be in her room for the rest of her life, or until she decides she no longer wants them in her room as decorations. And they're going to be a constant reminder of her being loved and uplifted. And I cannot take away the racism in this country, but I will. So I am already surrounding my child around a lot of love, to where that will not be something that cripples her life. I will not allow it to cripple her life, and I cannot allow it to cripple my life. So I have to work on how I handled, my thought process. I can't focus on dying, because I need to live, and I need to live for my daughter. So I had to think about living for my daughter and the kind of life I wanted her to live. We also discussed that I might not be able to control what happens during my delivery, because delivery is something that is very unpredictable, but I can plan. And instead of thinking about dying during childbirth, I can plan my birthing plan, and I can write down what I would like to happen and share them with my delivering doctor, so they can see what can be implemented based off of what's going on. So who would I like in the room? What smells would I like in the room? What music would I like being played? Would I like a yoga ball when I'm at the hospital when I'm contracting? What positions would I like to be in? Would I like to have a water birth? Things that I can control. I cannot control what happens on that day, but I can make a plan and know that that plan might not go as I have it written out, but I have a plan in place, and maybe certain things from that plan might be implemented based on what's happening on that day. But instead of thinking about dying, let me plan the best that I can. And that was having a great birthing team that looked like me, and that was also having a birthing plan based off my wants and what I thought I needed. I cannot end racism in this country, but I can continue to educate people around me who are willing to learn. So there is a Facebook group that I help admin that helps childcare providers learn about isms. So that's like racism, sexism, isms, and phobias, right? So it's like homophobia and things of that nature, and educating us all on how to be better adults, who we can be better at educating children, because the learning starts with us. Children are like sponges. Whatever we teach them, they will soak up. But first, we have to be willing to learn amongst adults. So as adults, we're having these conversations and we're keeping, the discussions going. And we are talking about how can we take these discussions and trickle it down to the children that we are providing for. How can we teach these children to be better people? How can we teach these children to not be racist, to not be sexist, to not be homophobic, to be open and loving to any and everybody that they encounter in their life? How can we teach these children to stand up to hate? We cannot teach a child to stand up to hate until we teach them what hate they're standing up to and against. So it's continuing the education process. And that was something that I obviously love doing. I love to help people better themselves. I love helping myself become better. So it was an amazing experience to educate and continue to educate, because we cannot end racism, sexism, homophobia, etc. without educating. So those were things that I focused on and that I could control, and that I started to think about, and I started to redirect my energy to. No, it did not completely cure my depression, but it helped me work myself out of a depression. So March 4th, 2021, I delivered a beautiful and healthy baby girl. But my pregnancy my delivery was something that I had not expected. It was full of twists and turns. So on March 3rd, I want to say about 4 a.m., I started to get contractions. At the time, I thought they were Braxton Hicks because I had felt them before and I had been to the emergency room for them before, and they had told me that they were contractions, but they weren't intense and close apart. So they were probably Braxton Hicks, which was preparing my body for actual delivery. So when I started feeling those same pains at 4:30 in the morning on March 3rd, I just thought they were Braxton Hicks, but they were a little bit more intense, and I would just take a warm bath and hope that it would go away. I started to vomit a little bit, and I knew that it wasn't just Braxton Hicks, that it was early labor and my body was preparing myself for delivery, but who knew when that would happen? So I did take the day off work. I did go to the emergency room, everything checked out, so I was discharged, and I came back home and was just told to rest because delivery was to be expected within the next few days because the symptoms that I had reflected of delivery. So, or labor. Labor was starting. So I'm home and I'm relaxing, and I want to say about 8 o'clock that night on March 3rd, I started to bleed and I was spotting. So I called the midwife on staff. I alerted my midwife and my birthing doula, and they let me know that when I start to bleed enough to soak a pad, that's when I should go into the emergency room to keep count of my contractions and to see how far apart they were because I was in labor. And they wanted me to labor as long as I could at home because with COVID, my support person cannot come in with me until I'm in active labor and I'm admitted into the hospital and my COVID test comes back negative. So they did not want me to be in the unknown phase of am I in labor, am I not, and be laboring alone. So they encouraged me to try to be at home as long as I could. But I lived 30 to 45 minutes from the hospital that I was delivering at. So I called again at about, I want to say 10:30, 11 o'clock on March 3rd and let them know, hey, I was still spotting. No, it was not enough to soak a pad, but this is how far I live from the hospital. This is how close my contractions are. Can I come in? They told me yes. So I proceeded to come to the hospital, and I am on the contraction monitor. They have the heartbeat monitor set up, and they're monitoring the contractions and the baby's heartbeat. We're monitoring my heartbeat, the baby's heartbeat, and my contractions. They're letting me know that I am in labor, but my contractions are not close enough together to be admitted. They let me know that they'll come back in the room at 3 o'clock in the morning to check and see how far along dilated that I was, because they did not check when I first got there because I let them know that dilation checks were something that I did not want too many of due to personal preferences, and they respected that, and they let me know that they would have to do a dilation check before I was discharged to know if I was in labor or not. So I told them okay, but we never got to that point because at 2:30 that morning my water broke. So they come in the room, they confirm that my water broke, and they take a COVID test, and my COVID test comes back negative. So I'm able to call my fiance and let him know that I am in labor. Grab the hospital bags and make your way to the hospital. So I'm getting admitted. He's on his way to the hospital, and he gets there about 4:30 in the morning after I'm discharged, and I'm in my labor and delivery room. And about 6:30, then contractions started getting more intense, and I did opt to get an epidural. At the time, I was 4 centimeters dilated, and I got the epidural. After the epidural was administered, my baby's heart rate started to drop, and that was a concern because it lets them know that the baby was in distress. So her heart rate dropped, and the doctors are rushing into the room, and they're trying to see if they can get the heart rate to come back up without rushing me in for a C-section, They are able to get her heart rate back up, but they let me know that if that continues to happen, I might need an emergency C-section. So they come in with the paperwork and they're talking to me about it, and they're letting me know that no, this is not something that they have to do right now, but I'm signing this waiver just in case it happens. And I'm teary-eyed because, again, I'm thinking, oh my God, I might die during childbirth, because C-section is a surgery and I could bleed out, and, it's not a vaginal birth, and it's very scary. So I'm crying, but they're reassuring me that, it's not something that I have to do right now, but it's just a waiver that I need to sign just in case, because our heart rate did drop. At the time, there was a Black OBGYN there, and she let me know that it was standard procedure and they wanted to do whatever was best to keep me and baby healthy and alive. So she let me know that we can have a deeper and, more serious conversation if the heart rate continues to drop. But since her heart rate was stable, just to sign the paperwork just in case, and we're going to continue to try for a vaginal birth. So her heart rate stabilizes. I'm laying on my right side, and I want to say about 2.5 hours later, I call my nurse in and ask, can we rotate to my left side? Because I know through research that, laying on one side too long after an epidural, that becomes the more numb side, and the numbness lessens on the side that you're not, if you're not rotating. So I try to switch to my left side, and baby's heart rate drops again. Doctors flood into the room. They're trying to get baby's heart rate back up. And this is the second time that it had happened. So again, we're talking about C-sections, but the baby's heart rate was able to rise again after I am placed on my hands and knees, and her heart rate is back up and we're okay. So they let me know, like, hey, she's good again. We're going to monitor her to make sure that she remains good, but we can't let this keep happening because baby's going to be in distress. So we're still trying. I'm still at 4 centimeters dilated, and I want to say around 4 o'clock that afternoon, a doctor comes in and she says, hey, I want to try something. I want to try to rotate the baby into a different position. This position will help the baby be in place for a better, to better help her drop and make for hopefully a smoother delivery, and hopefully, you'll dilate more after I do this. So I agree. And she, positions the baby in the right position, leaves the room. 30 minutes later, comes back in to check my dilation, and I was 8 centimeters dilated at that time, which was great because, it worked. Although after that, I stalled again. So about 8:30 that night, on March 4th, they come back in the room and they let me know that, hey, you're still at 8 centimeters dilated. The baby heart rate dropped enough times during the day. We looked at your birthing plan, and we know that you are very particular in some of your concerns. You want your fiance in the room if you have a C-section. You like your diffuser. You like your music. These are things that we cannot accommodate for you if we have to rush you back for a C-section. We don't want to put you into panic mode. We don't want you to have an anxiety attack. So we can allow these things in the room if you consent for a C-section. They're like, we can, leave the room and let you discuss it over with your fiance, but we want mother and baby to be healthy and well and have a safe delivery. So we can either wait and see if, you continue to progress. But right now it's looking like your birth thing is stalling. My water did break, so they were letting me know that baby and I were at risk of infection. She had pooped before, coming out, so they were letting me know that she was at risk of, I'm trying to remember, but it was her being at risk of having a digestive issue due to there being poop in the uterus with her. So they're letting me know, like, these are all the concerns, and we'll allow you to make your decision. My fiance and I had already talked about it after, that morning when I signed the waiver and we said, let's just go for a C-section. Let him get dressed. Let's get the music. Let's get the essential oils and let's do a C-section. So I am being taken back into the OR. I have my music playing, and the same OBGYN, who was an African-American woman, was present in the operating room during my delivery. The music is going, my fiance is there, and the essential oils are going, and I'm a little bit relaxed but still very frightened because this is a new experience, something that I was not ready for. I don't think I'll ever be ready for it, even if I was to go through it again. And now I'm preparing for my baby to be born. So I want to say about 20 to 30 minutes in, I hear my baby crying, and it's the most magical experience ever. They take her and they delay the cord clamping because that was also on my birthing plan. And they get her cleaned up. They give her to my fiance because that was also my birthing plan, that if I was not able to hold her right away, that at least he's able to. They give her to him, and he brings her over to me, and they recorded the most beautiful first encounter of my daughter and I. The song Superwoman by Alicia Keys was playing from my playlist, and he's recording me meeting my daughter for the first time. I'm medicated, so I am seeing her, but I'm still a little foggy due to the medication, so I'm kissing her and nuzzling her because, of course, my hands are still, but I can move my face, and she's moving her face, and it was the best first meet that I could have asked for at that time due to the circumstances. But I noticed that my heart rate was increasing, and apparently I had hemorrhaged, so I was losing blood during the C-section. My fiance and baby were taken out of the room as they were closing me up, and I found out that I had a fever during my delivery. I did have an infection I believe it was due to my water breaking so early in the day and laboring for so long. My heart rate was very high, and I did hemorrhage. So as they were cutting my incision through my uterus, they nicked a blood vessel, which caused me to lose a significant amount of blood, not enough to need a blood transfusion, but I did lose a significant amount of blood. So when I was in the recovery area, I was in and out of sleep because I was tired, of course, but also due to the medication that I was being given. I was given a lot of antibiotics. I was given pain medication, and I was just not very active for the first, I want to say, because I went in at, I want to say 8:30, and by the time I woke up and was able to be alert, it was about 3 a.m. the next morning. So that whole time it was just my fiance and the baby, and it was fun to see him holding her that whole time. Like every time that I opened my eyes in between sleep, I would see him still sitting in the chair holding her. And when I woke up at 3 a.m. the next day, he had let me know that he had not put her down and he had held her that whole time because he knew that not even skin to skin, but that him holding her was something that I had in my birthing plan. He was worried about me because, of all the things that had transpired during the C-section, but due to great doctors and the grace of God, I survived childbirth. And I was laying there like, now I can live, right? Like now I can be a mother to my beautiful baby girl. I knew that I had just experienced surgery, so I knew that there was a road of recovery ahead of me. But I had survived childbirth. All I could think about is I gave birth to my beautiful, healthy baby girl. I'm, feverish, and my temperature's high, my blood pressure's high, and I am on antibiotics, but I'm alive. They're monitoring to make sure that I'm not bleeding too much and I'm not having blood clots and that my incision is healing. But I'm alive and I can be here for my baby girl, so I can think happy thoughts. I'm not sitting here thinking of, negative thoughts anymore. I can close my eyes and be happy with dreams of being in my daughter's life. And in that fear of childbirth is now behind me. I experienced that, and I know that things do happen. You cannot stick to a birthing plan. Racism is still out there. Depression is something that I'm still dealing with, which is something that I would like to touch on in my next podcast, because I am struggling with postpartum depression and I am in therapy for that as well. So I am not recovered, and I'm not a new person giving people advice on how to navigate depression or postpartum or anything like that. I'm just sharing my experience with battling depression while pregnant, being a Black woman while pregnant, being pregnant during a pandemic, being pregnant during a very racially intense election, and knowing that you're not alone, knowing that I am not the only woman who has felt this way, knowing that I'm not the only Black woman who has had this fear, knowing that maybe this podcast might help another woman or another family who may be having some of these feelings, another woman who might be feeling this way, not just for Black women, but for women in general. But I am speaking to Black women because I am you, and I have felt fears that you might be feeling. I know what racism is in this country, and I have felt it, and I have endured, and I still fear for my life and the people that I love's life and my daughter's life. But I am doing everything in my power to teach my child to love herself and love others, and I'm hopefully going to continue to teach others to be anti-racist and loving and open and receptive to people who are different than them. And I hope that we are all doing our part to educate ourselves and people in our lives on how to be better people, because that's the only way that we can make this world a better place for the next generation. The only way that we can get the next generation to be better than what is already here is to educate ourselves and to educate them. So I hope my podcast reaches a mother who might need this, might reach a friend who may know someone who's pregnant during a pandemic and might want to reach out to them. For people who might just want to check in on a friend during this pandemic, because we're still experiencing this. For people who just want to reach out to someone and just say, hey, I love you, I'm thinking about you, because that does make a difference. Having a support team around you, having people in your life who love and support you and are there for you on that journey through depression or whatever you're battling or struggling with is very important. I am blessed to have a great support system. I have my family, I have my friends, I have children in my life who love me, and I have a daughter of my own now. And my support team is very active and proactive, and they are here for me, and I'm very grateful for that. And I want people to figure out how they can get a support system if they don't have family or friends, to find free resources that can help them through their battles of mental health and to get to a good mental spot. I am not a therapist. I cannot give any recommendation or advice. I can only share my experience, and I had a great experience with therapy, so I would recommend that to anybody. It helped me cope with being pregnant during COVID. It helped me cope with being pregnant during social injustices, being pregnant during elections, being pregnant knowing that I'm at risk with, my fibroids, knowing that as a Black woman in this country, there is a higher chance of me not surviving childbirth, but not letting that stop me from being happy and to stop me from enjoying life. And I want people to know that that thought process is okay. It's okay to not be okay. And that's something I had to keep telling myself because I just wanted people to think that I was okay. And I put on a great facade and put on a smile and was just like, I'm okay, I'm happy, I'm preparing for becoming a mother. And I was not always okay. And if I had told people that I wasn't okay, I probably would have had more people actively trying to help me versus doing the work on my own. And if I could go back and change anything, it would be to be open and honest with the people who wanted me to be open and honest with them and not think that I was burdening them and to not think that I was being too negative, to know that my concerns were real and my voice is valid and that they wanted to hear it and that I should have reached out to them and I should have used the support when I had it. This is my first podcast after my baby is born, so it might be a week or two before I can post my next one, but my next podcast will touch bases on recovery from my C-section and struggling with postpartum depression. I'm still struggling, so there is no perfect answer that I can give any mother for struggling with depression, but hopefully with these podcasts I can get more women and more people in general to talk about mental health and to try to tear down the stigmas that is attached to mental health, because in being not okay and knowing that it's okay to not be okay while you're pregnant, because you assume like, okay, I'm a mother, I'm becoming a mother, I'm supposed to be as happy as ever and I should not be feeling this way, and it makes you feel subconscious about why you're even feeling this way, because there's a stigma around pregnancy, there's a stigma around motherhood, and you don't want to raise any red flags with anyone. And it's okay to not be okay. You're not a bad mother, you're not a bad person, you're not abnormal, you're normal, and other people feel this way. So I hope that this podcast reaches somebody who needs to hear it. I hope you guys share it and enjoy it. I'm open and ready for feedback, and I am excited to share my journey with you guys on postpartum depression and my recovery from my C-section and everything that I plan to talk about thereafter. So I want to thank you guys for joining me on my podcast, Miss VR Speaks, and I will be back with my next podcast on recovering from my C-section and dealing with postpartum depression.